Imagine an army on the move, not a small raiding party, not a few hundred men, but 16,000 souls. Red-coated soldiers, Indian sepoys, officers' wives riding carriages, children clinging to their mothers, servants dragging baggage, horses neighing under the weight of cannons and supplies. They march out of Kabul on a freezing January morning in 1842. The air is thin, snow falls in sheets, and the mountains ahead loom like giants. The British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world, is retreating.
This wasn't just an army on the move. It was an empire trying to save face. The British marched into Afghanistan convinced of their own superiority. But when they left, it wasn't victory, it was desperation. The retreat was less a military maneuver and more a panic dressed up as strategy.
1 week later, at the gates of Jalalabad, a lone horse appears. On its back is a man, pale, frozen, barely alive. His horse collapses. He can hardly speak. "Where is the army?" the guards ask. He answers, "I am the army." Only one man had survived. So how could the might of the British Empire, rulers of India, lords of the seas, be reduced to just one broken survivor? This is the story of the greatest disaster in British military history.
The image of William Brydon arriving alone is one of the most haunting in British history. It shattered the myth of invincibility. For Victorians back home, it wasn't just a military defeat, it was a psychological blow. How could the greatest empire on earth be humbled by tribesmen in the mountains?
The 19th century was a century of empires. Britain ruled India, the crown jewel. Russia was expanding across Central Asia. The two powers eyed each other with suspicion. The British called it the Great Game, a struggle for influence in the heart of Asia. Afghanistan lay between them, a rugged land of mountains, deserts, and fiercely independent tribes. For Britain, Afghanistan was the buffer, the wall protecting India from Russia. But the British were paranoid. What if Russia took Kabul? What if Russian troops marched south into India? That fear was enough. In 1839, Britain sent its armies into Afghanistan. Their mission? Dethrone the Afghan ruler Dost Muhammad Khan and replace him with a puppet, Shah Shuja. The invasion was swift. British troops entered Kabul almost unopposed. Shah Shuja was placed on the throne. Victory seemed easy. But in Afghanistan, easy victories never last.
The British misunderstood Afghanistan completely. They thought installing a puppet king would bring stability, but to the Afghans, Shah Shuja was an illegitimate ruler, and the presence of foreign troops was an insult to their independence.
At first, Kabul seemed calm. British officers hosted dinners, played polo, and lived in gardens with fruit and fountains. They treated Afghanistan as if it were just another outpost of empire. But beneath the surface, hatred simmered. The British cut soldiers' pay. They raised taxes. They mocked Afghan customs. Officers paraded openly with Afghan mistresses. To the tribes, it was an insult beyond forgiveness. Afghan loyalty was to tribe, not foreign kings. To them, Shah Shuja was a British puppet. The occupiers were arrogant, soft, and blind to the storm they had created. By 1841, Kabul was a city ready to explode.
To Afghans, hospitality is sacred, but so is honor. When British officers disrespected traditions and flaunted women, it turned quiet resentment into open hatred.
In November 1841, the first sparks of rebellion caught fire. Afghan fighters attacked British supply caravans. Isolated garrisons were wiped out. Then came the boldest strike. The British envoy, Sir William Macnaghten, was lured into negotiations. Instead of peace, he was seized, shot, and his body hacked apart. His remains were dragged through the streets and displayed in the bazaar. The message was clear: the British were not safe.
When your political envoy is murdered and displayed publicly, that's not just a rebellion, it's a message. The Afghans were saying, you don't control us, you don't belong here.
Inside the cantonment, the British camp in Kabul, panic spread. In crises, leadership makes the difference, but the British had a commander who could barely lead himself, Major General William Elphinstone. He was old, frail, and indecisive. He delayed every decision, argued over trivial matters, and wasted precious time. His officers begged for action, but he dithered. Food was running out. Winter was coming. Afghan tribes controlled the roads. At last, Elphinstone agreed to negotiate. The terms? The British would retreat to Jalalabad, 90 miles away, and in exchange, Afghan leaders promised them safe passage. Safe passage in Afghanistan? It was a promise that would vanish like smoke.
Elphinstone was the worst possible man to be in charge. He was indecisive, sickly, and couldn't inspire confidence. His hesitation cost lives every single day of that retreat.
January 6, 1842. The retreat begins. Picture the scene. A column stretching for miles, soldiers trudging through knee-deep snow, families bundled in rags, children crying from hunger, horses stumbling on ice. Out of 16,000 people, only 4,500 are trained soldiers. The rest are civilians, wives, servants, cooks, stable boys. A moving city, utterly vulnerable. The cold is brutal. Temperatures fall below freezing. Many have no boots. Camp followers die by the roadside, their bodies stiff with frost. And then, from the hills, the first shots ring out.
The Afghans had promised safe passage. Instead, they waited in the high ground. From the ridges, tribesmen fire down. At first, just a few shots, then volleys. Muskets crack in the distance. Arrows whistle. Stones tumble down. The British column panics. Horses bolt. Children scream. Each night, campfires burn lower as numbers dwindle. Every morning, the road is lined with corpses frozen in the snow. This was not a retreat. This was an execution.
The Afghans fought exactly as their geography demanded. They didn't need pitched battles. They just had to sit on the ridges, fire down into the columns, and let the snow and hunger finish the job.
The worst comes at the Kabul Pass, a narrow defile hemmed in by cliffs, snow piled high. Thousands of terrified people funneled into a natural trap. From above, Afghan warriors unleash hell. Muskets fire into the crowd. Rocks and arrows rain down. Soldiers throw away weapons, their hands too frozen to pull a trigger. The mighty British army is now a starving mob.
To Afghans, this wasn't just war. It was about defending their land, their families, and their honor. No foreign army could expect mercy when it came to that.
By January 12th, only about 200 soldiers remain, frostbitten, starving, hopeless. At Gandamuk, they make their last stand on a snowy hill. Surrounded, out of ammunition, they fix bayonets. Some fight with swords, others with bare hands. They are cut down to the last man. The snow runs red, and then silence.
The image of British soldiers on that snowy hill at Gandamuk, out of ammo, stabbing with bayonets until the very end, became one of the most haunting symbols of imperial hubris.
Out of 16,000 who left Kabul, only one figure remains on the road to Jalalabad. Dr. William Brydon, an assistant surgeon. His horse staggers beneath him, ribs showing, hooves bleeding. Brydon's skull is split from a sword blow. He has bullet wounds in his body. His face is pale as death. On January 13th, he reaches Jalalabad. Guards rush forward. "Where is the army?" they ask. Brydon whispers, "I am the army."
Brydon's arrival became legendary. But remember, there were survivors. Women and children were taken hostage and later ransomed. Yet the symbolic power of one man reaching safety was unforgettable.
The news shocks Britain. The empire that believed it could never be defeated has lost an entire army. Not to Russia, not to France, but to Afghan tribesmen with muskets and mountains. Afghanistan earns its grim title, the graveyard of empires. And the lesson is burned into history. You can march into Afghanistan, but you will never march out the same.
This wasn't just a defeat, it was a warning. One ignored not just by the British, but by every empire that came after. The Soviets, the Americans. Afghanistan breaks those who try to control it.
Why did only one man survive? Because arrogance blinded an empire. Because mountains and snow were deadlier than bullets. Because Afghan tribes would rather die than bow to foreigners. The retreat from Kabul was not just a military disaster, it was a warning. A warning ignored again and again by the British in later wars, by the Soviets in the 20th century, and by America in the 21st. Empires come and go, but Afghanistan remains. And in the winter of 1842, Dr. William Brydon became the lone survivor of a story that would haunt empires forever.